And so now I want to say some other thank yous before we get started. Thank you to our major supporters, Jewish Family and Children's Service, which runs the Dementia Friends program for all of Massachusetts. And I just have to boast because I'm proud that we have been chosen by the Boston Globe again as one of the 100 best women-led organizations in Massachusetts. And I want to give a shout out to our CEO, Gail Schulman, for leading us. And I want to thank Point 32 Health Plan Foundation. You're going to hear more about their pivotal role supporting our work, and you'll hear from Nora Moreno-Cargi in a few moments. And I want to thank the Lebovitz Family Charitable Trust, which has been one of our key funders from the start of our work and has been funding our Dementia Friends initiative in synagogues as well. Thank you to our silver sponsors, Embrace Home Care and Massachusetts Councils on Aging. It is really important to be able to provide an event like this free of charge for people to attend, and our silver sponsors are really important in making that possible. Thank you. I want to thank our promotional partners, the Alzheimer's Association, Massachusetts, New Hampshire chapter, Dementia Action Alliance, and National Council of Dementia Minds. You will hear more about all of these organizations during the presentation today. And thank you so much to our speakers, our interpreters, and many helpers. We are grateful for each and every one of you. And many collaborating organizations as well that are part of this work. Those of you who have purchased continuing education units, I want to let you know you do need to attend the whole event and to complete the evaluation survey, which we will email to you after the event. And this program has been approved for 3 social work continuing education units, and we can also provide a certificate, for nursing and other professions. This meeting is being recorded. We will email everyone who is registered for this event a link to a webpage where we will have recordings, slides, and resources. It'll take probably a week or 2 before you receive that, but you will get that. Please keep yourself on mute today. We have a very large group. At this point, we have more than 450 people with us, and we had 700 people registered, so we do need to ask you to stay on mute. But we do want to hear from you. So if you have questions or comments at any point, please type those into the chat box. And my colleague Margie is going to be watching the chat box, and we are going to make sure to respond to as many questions and comments in the last part of today's program, and also as we go along. If you're having any technical difficulties, please chat Ask Tech Help, which is right at the top of your list of participants, and Anne will be able to help you. So let's take a moment and see who is here today. I want to launch a quick poll and have you take a moment and let us know something about who you are. If you're here as a person living with dementia, if you're here as a person with a friend or relative living with dementia, if you're here because this is related to your profession, or if you're just here because you're interested. So I'll wait a few more minutes and then we'll see who's here. Okay, it looks like the responses have stopped coming in, so I'm going to just share the results. It looks like most people are here as professionals. We also have a mix of people who are here who are living with dementia, and welcome. And we are grateful you're here, and we want to hear your perspective. We welcome your comments at any point. There are a number of people who are here because they have someone in their life who's living with dementia. And we are glad you're here, and we want to respond to your questions and comments as well. And it's wonderful that several of you are here just because you're interested, because this topic affects all of us. So glad everybody's here. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to say hello in the chat and share where you are geographically and a little bit about yourself if you would like. Go on now and talk about our plan for today. The times are approximate, but in a moment, Nora Moreno-Cargi of Point 32 Health Foundation will give a short welcome. And then I'm going to set up our topic for today by talking about disparities, differences, and why community partners are so important. After that, I will introduce our community partners, and Ms. Anitra Nia-Mostasero will share a personal story. Then we'll have a roundtable discussion with community partners, which is really the heart and soul of what we're here to do today, is to hear about talking about dementia in different cultural and linguistic communities. There will be a short break during which we have a video with photo montages and messages from community partners that you can watch if you wish. You're also welcome to take a break, do what you need to do, and come back. And then the last presentation will be what we call the Road to Representation. I'll be talking about how Dementia Friends Massachusetts has structured itself to become more inclusive and representative of the many communities that we serve here in Massachusetts. We have reserved the last 25 minutes to discuss your questions and comments. So again, please put those in the chat at any point.
Beth, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Vietnamese is not on the globe to be interpreted.
It's not.
No.
Thank you for letting me know.
Well, folks, the good folks have been letting me know in the chat.
Yeah, it was there. Let me
yeah, earlier it was, but now I don't see either. That's why I typed it on. I don't want interrupting you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to add an interpreter. So I think what happened, I had to specially add that to the meeting because it's not one of the options that Zoom provides. And then when I tested interpretation and ended it, it turned it off. So I am trying now to add an interpreter. Let me see how I do this. I'm sorry, bear with me for a moment, please.
In the meantime, I'm going to put the program books in the chat so you
Thank
can.
you, Anne. If you could put the program books and the okay, let's see, and the resource list in the chat. Okay. Let me see if that worked.
Let me check.
Huh.
It's like disappear.
I added Lena and Vietnamese. Update. I'm trying to make it update. It says that it's added, and yet
Let's see.
I'm going to try doing it again. Okay, did it work that time?
Yes.
Okay, it was added. Thank you, everyone. I apologize for that. Very good. Okay, so as you see, Anne has added the program book where you can see the agenda and also the resource list, and we are hoping to add to that resource list if you have any great dementia information and support resources that are available nationwide and focus on one or several underserved communities. Please put those in the chat at any time today or email me and we will add them. And please note that the Alzheimer's Association Helpline and the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging Helpline are available in many languages, and those are at the top of the resource list. So if you have a concern about someone and you have questions that don't get answered today, please call one of those helplines. And with that, I am honored to introduce Nora Moreno-Cargi. She is the president of Point 32 Health Foundation and the vice president for corporate citizenship of Point 32 Health. And in this dual role, she helps to shape strategies to support nonprofit organizations working to address systemic disparities and eliminate barriers to access. She serves on the Governor's Council to Address Aging in Massachusetts, the board of the Connecticut Council for Philanthropy, the Executive Forum for Boston College's Center for Corporate Citizenship, and the Elder Stakeholders Group of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs, and as a mentor for Conexión, a Latino, Latina, Latinx mid-career professional developmental program. She's an alum of Lead Boston and just does such important work. Point 32 Health Foundation has been funding Dementia Friends Massachusetts's work with community partners since 2019, really making it possible. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Nora to say a few words of welcome. Nora, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much, Beth. What an amazing gathering. I want to express my appreciation for you and your leadership in championing work that strives to eliminate inequities, is culturally sensitive, and is linguistically appropriate, even when technology fails us. Your work is meaningful and relevant because it's centered in community. Point 32 Health Foundation is new, but we build on the legacy of both Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan foundations. We follow your example. You work so hard to ensure that inclusion is at the heart of everything you do. We too work to lead with community, equity, and inclusion. We, like you, believe that we need to be close to those with lived experiences in order to get the best answers to issues facing communities. We value everyone involved in this effort, everyone at the table here. And we want to say that you and the team at Jewish Family and Children's Services have acted in remarkable ways to expand this effort in Massachusetts. Community disparities are real. Systemic racism is real and has led to disinvestment in communities of color. By co-creating these programs with advocates who are diverse and are from the communities you serve, you are reinvesting, recommitting. You, Beth, and your team are living your values, leading with community, listening and learning to understand, meeting people where they are. That's what we do. This approach acknowledges communities' strength, their wisdom, and that often the smartest ideas are found in small community-based organizations. We are privileged and honored to have you as a partner. Thank you for the opportunity to support this important work this day and to learn from the speakers today. And then I want to close by acknowledging and applauding your innovative work. The national recognition for living well with dementia at the Cafe is further proof you lead by example. Your work is creating communities of support and companionship. Thank you again for all you do. Have an amazing session today.
Thank you so much, Nora. It is always very inspiring to hear from you, and we are grateful for your work and for your support. So now we're going to jump right into our first presentation, which is...
Beth, do you mind? I got a note that we're not sure if the Vietnamese interpretation's going through. Just want to check that it is. Andrew said he couldn't hear it.
It does show that it is an available channel. So Andrew, you might need to stop and reconnect to it because it did stop for a while. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's patience with the technical difficulties. So I want to just introduce myself a little bit better. My name's Beth Salzberg. I'm a social worker at Jewish Family and Children's Service in Waltham, Massachusetts. And Nora mentioned our work with memory cafes. We have a program called the JF&CS Memory Cafe Percolator that helps organizations with their efforts to run these social programs for people living with dementia and those who care about them. I also have the privilege of leading the Dementia Friends program for Massachusetts and working with our community partners as well as other specific groups like synagogues through our synagogue initiative. So let's start at the beginning. What is dementia? This is a graphic from the Alzheimer's Association that I'm sure is familiar to many of you. Dementia is an umbrella. It includes changes in memory and other kinds of thinking, and there are many conditions that can cause it. It's normal to have a harder time remembering things as we get older, and sometimes people wonder, am I developing dementia? So I just want to say a few words about that. There are treatable causes of memory loss and confusion that can look like maybe they're dementia, but they're not. Here are some: depression, grief, some nutritional imbalances, an infection, dehydration, side effects of medication. So for those of you who are here because of a concern about yourself or someone you care about, please talk with a healthcare provider if you're concerned, and that way that person can help you to begin to understand what might be going on, and it may be something that can be treated. I also want to mention that dementia affects the whole circle of people who care. So it affects the person living with dementia, but it also affects the people who are close to them. Family and friends also need support and information, and many resources are available. On the resource list, you'll find a link to a guide put together by the Diverse Elders Coalition, which was based on a lot of research in many cultural and linguistic communities. One of the interesting things they found is that the term caregiver is not used in every community. In some communities, people would say, I help my mother, or I help my father, or my sister, or my husband. They don't use the term caregiver because it's just part of life that you help family when they need it. So
I'm sorry, Beth, I'm sorry to interrupt. We still
Not
can't
at all.
hear the translation in Vietnamese. And
It is
someone
in,
asked, the slides will be shared.
yes, the slides and recording will be shared. I do not know why it says that the Vietnamese interpretation is working. So maybe that person needs to join the Vietnamese channel. If you need interpretation, you have to click on the, I'll just quickly go back. Let's see if I can do this to show.
I don't want you to worry. If you could just give us the names of the Vietnamese and the Portuguese interpreters, and I can reach out to them directly.
Okay. Lena Nguyen is the Vietnamese interpreter, and Rosanne, Rosane, is the Portuguese interpreter.
Great. Thank you so much. Just continue on and I'll speak with them.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I appreciate that. Okay. So very good. So I think, most of you on the line here are professionals, so you're really aware of the large impact of dementia. This is from the Alzheimer's Association's Facts and Figures. This has a huge emotional, financial impact at the individual, family level, and the level of the whole nation. Now, I've been talking about why dementia is hard. I also want to say people can live well with dementia, and this is a very important message here today. I'm going to just show you a few images. This is Kate Swaffer, who lives with dementia in Australia. She founded Dementia Alliance International. She earned graduate degrees after having been diagnosed with dementia. Emily Ong is an advocate living with dementia in Singapore. And I think she might be here with us today. If you are, Emily, we're so honored to have you. Welcome. And let's see, sorry, I am running into some technical issues as well. There we go. So Emily is also an extraordinary person who is an advocate in Singapore, who is helping to guide Singapore's work and really the international conversation about living well with dementia. And then these last photos are perfectly ordinary people enjoying themselves at memory cafes. So I also want to make the point that, people can live well with dementia in all kinds of ways. Sometimes by becoming an advocate, sometimes by just finding ways to adapt and get support and participate in a growing number of good resources that can enhance the quality of life. Later, you're going to hear from Ms. Anitra Mostasero about her own journey living a very full life with dementia. So this is just important to keep in mind that while we are talking about the challenges of dementia, our goal is for people to live well with dementia, and we need to stay focused on that. So now we're going to focus a lens at a few different levels. So I want you to pretend that you're in a field and you have a camera and you're focusing it. And maybe first you focus it at the distant mountains. And so you can see those sharply. And then you focus it again and you can see some hills that are closer to you. And then you focus it one more time and you can see a flower that is very close to you. So all of those things are there. They are all real, but we can't necessarily see them all at the same time. So we're going to do that now, but we're going to do it talking about dementia. We're going to focus at 3 different levels: a global level, which is like the faraway mountains. We're going to look at a community level, which is like the hills that are a bit farther, and the individual perspective, which is like that flower. So let's start focusing on the global level. The global population is rapidly aging. More and more people in the US and worldwide are living with dementia. And for those of you who saw the most recent World Alzheimer's report by the Alzheimer's Disease International, you would have learned that more and more low and middle income countries are really seeing the impact of dementia. In addition, and I'm in the US, that's my focus here, our communities are multicultural. So for our many community members who emigrated from another country, they took their heritage with them, and that is important for them and for their children and their grandchildren and so on. So if you are working with immigrant communities, it's important to learn something about how dementia is viewed in their home country, because that continues to influence their experience of dementia here in the US. And finally, when we think about who are the people providing direct hands-on care, more than a third in the US are immigrants. I know here in Massachusetts, that statistic is at least 40%. So it's very important that we think of a global perspective. Now we're going to focus the lens again, and we're going to think about it at that middle level. a linguistic, cultural, geographic, community perspective. And when we look at that perspective, we see that there are disparities. Disparities are differences in health and healthcare between groups that stem from broader inequities. So in other words, these differences aren't because of something inherent about these groups of people. They're because of the conditions in which they live. And we see disparities in the risk of developing dementia, access to getting a diagnosis, and access to research participation, and access to information and services. We're going to talk about each of these areas. Let's start with disparities in the risk of developing dementia. I want to mention a study that was published in 2016. It was a very large study, and it looked at a 14-year period, and it looked at 6 different ethnic or racial groups. And so it was a very important study because it really compared this large group of people over a long period of time, broken down into these groups. And it found that in this group of people that was researched, African Americans had the highest risk of developing dementia. The next highest group was American Indian and Alaska Native, and then Latino, and then Pacific Islander, and then white, and then Asian American. And those are the categories that this research team used. So it's very important to see that there are differences in how likely different population groups are to develop dementia, and we have to ask, why is that? To stay on this theme of the risk of developing dementia, there's some other research I want to point out. There was a study published in 2019 by Flatt and colleagues that found that LGBTQ plus people were almost 1/3 more likely to report changes in their memory and thinking. This is also called subjective cognitive decline, which may be an early sign of dementia. Women are also more likely than men to develop dementia. 2/3 of people living with dementia are women, and also 2/3 of people who care for someone living with dementia are women. And that is both professional and family members. It's majority women. So we don't know all the reasons for these differences, but these differences are there, and that is something we need to look at. Now let's talk about disparities in access to getting a diagnosis. Getting a diagnosis can take many visits to a healthcare provider. It may require having a healthcare provider in your geographic area who has expertise. It can take a lot of persistence. Later, you'll hear Nia Mostasero talking about her experience and how it took time and persistence to get an accurate diagnosis. So there are many barriers possible. Some of them could be outright discrimination and also just lack of access to these resources that it takes to go through this process. Pardon me. So one recent finding is that Black participants in Alzheimer's disease research studies were 35% less likely to be diagnosed than white participants, even though we know that Black individuals are more likely than white individuals to have dementia. So it shows that there's a real problem with being able to get that diagnosis. And that is from a 2021 study. And by the way, links to all of these studies are in your resource list. So let's talk about another category, which is disparities in research participation. Now, you might be involved in research, or you might see it as something that's not related to your day-to-day life. But research is very important because it is how tools for diagnosis and treatment are developed. It's really how we know what we know. So every statistic I am telling you, we have that statistic because Some researchers got funds and they spent years studying to come up with this information. So research is really critical. And from the National Institute on Aging, from last year, we have the statistic: Latino and Black Americans make up less than 10% of all clinical trial participants in active Alzheimer's and related dementia research. So we know that Latino and Black Americans have a higher risk of dementia than white Americans, but they are less likely to be represented in research on Alzheimer's and related dementia. So this is a problem. It is also a problem that we do not have any research information about many demographic groups. So there are many cultural groups, many language groups where there just is not anything known about their risk of dementia here in the United States. Whoops, I'm sorry, somehow I just jumped ahead. Let me just jump back real quick. So let's talk about one factor influencing the problem with research participation, which is lack of trust. And this is from an Alzheimer's Association study done in 2021, which shows the percentage of adults in the US who believe medical research is unfair, that it's biased against people of color. And you see with every category here, white, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, more than a third of people who responded believe that it is biased. For African Americans, for Black Americans, it is 62%. More than half of the people who responded believe that medical research is biased. Now, there are many researchers and advocates and community organizations that are hard at work to solve this problem. And you'll hear later from some of our community partners who have also been working to build a bridge to the research community. So there is a lot of really important work being done right now, but it becomes sort of a vicious cycle because there is a long legacy that helps us understand why there is lack of trust. One of the resources in your list is this book, Medical Apartheid, by Harriet Washington, who's a medical ethicist. And it's a very important account of how African Americans have been mistreated, discriminated against, and even abused in the medical system in the United States since colonial times until now. So there are reasons for the lack of trust, but we have to work together to move beyond it because we need to change this problem of representation in research so that what we learn can include and benefit everyone. So this is something that's been recognized as an important issue for a long time. And this is just a list of bipartisan actions from the US Congress over time to try to make progress in making medical research more inclusive and representative of our diverse population in the United States. And most recently last year, the John Lewis National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities Research Endowment Revitalization Act put funds and energy toward this. So even though there are a lot of people very dedicated to making change, it takes time. Research takes years, and so it's something we just need to keep pushing forward on. Those of you who are here, who are part of the research community or who are working on inclusion in research, please feel free to make any comments in the chat about this topic as we go. So we've talked about the fact that there are disparities. We've talked about the fact that we don't even know very much about some groups of people or anything because the research hasn't been done. So now I want to introduce a different way to look at risk factors and how to reduce the risk of dementia. And so we are going to, whoops, sorry, my Zoom controls just jumped. Apologize for that. Here we go. So we're going to talk about something called non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors. See if I can move these controls out of my way. Here we go. So there are some risk factors for dementia that we can't change, and we call these non-modifiable. And these are aging and genetics. So we're getting older. That's a fact. I think it's a wonderful thing. But in any case, we don't have control over that. And genetics is something we don't have control over. If you look at all the people in the world living with dementia, there's a fairly small number of those people who have a very strong genetic link to dementia. One example would be people with Down syndrome. They have an extra chromosome which causes Down syndrome, and that also can cause Alzheimer's disease. There are also a relatively small number of families who have genes that make them very likely to develop Alzheimer's or some other condition that causes dementia. But for most people, the role of genetics isn't as big. So let's talk about modifiable risk factors, what we can change. And some of these we could change as a society, as an individual. Some we really have to work together as a society. Now, we call them reducing risk or modifying risk factors. We don't say we could prevent it. And that's an important distinction I want to explain before I show you what factors have been identified through research. So think about gardening. I'm sure some of you like to plant seeds, maybe you like to grow vegetables or flowers, and I want you to just think about that for a moment. So when you plant a garden, you do lots of things to try to have those plants grow and thrive. You will water them, you'll weed them, you'll take steps to try to keep them strong and healthy, but you can't guarantee that you will get the flowers and fruit or vegetables that you're hoping for, because there are so many factors. The weather is a factor. Maybe it's going to rain too much or not enough. Maybe the soil or the seeds have a problem with them that you don't know about. Or maybe your seedlings are coming up good and strong, and that attracts chipmunks and woodchucks and other creatures that want to eat your plants. So my point is just that we can only control so much. We cannot prevent dementia by doing healthy behaviors. We can just reduce our risk. So it's good to do all these things. They're healthy for us in many ways. There's no harm to it, but we can't prevent dementia. And if someone develops dementia, it's not their fault. And it doesn't mean that they didn't do the healthy things. Somebody might do all these healthy things and still develop dementia. So this is a wonderful graphic from the Alzheimer's Association, and I know it's hard to see it on the screen, but there's a link to this in English and Spanish in your resource list. And I'll just go over these quickly. So these are ideas that have been proven now by research to help reduce risk. Probably one of the most important ones is to exercise. So it says here, break a sweat. Exercise is very good for our hearts and for our brains. Studying, working hard, doing hard brain work helps our brains. Avoiding smoking, taking care of everything that keeps our heart healthy is very important. Avoiding head injury, eating a healthy diet, getting enough sleep, taking care of mental health. So getting some help and support when you're struggling with mental health. Staying socially connected. And again, challenging yourself by doing that kind of brain work that's challenging. Also, research has shown that it's very important to treat sensory impairments. So if someone has a hearing loss or vision loss, it's important to see if there's a way to get some help with that through assistive technology so that that person can continue to get all that visual and auditory input and stay socially connected and active. And there's more research underway looking at things like air pollution and many other factors that may affect risk. So now, looking at it this way, we can ask a different question about disparities. We can ask, where are there barriers to access? So when you look at these healthy behaviors, think about your community, and does everyone have a place to exercise safely? Does everyone have the ability to get a good night's sleep? Or if someone is working 2 or 3 jobs to afford food, are they going to be able to have a healthy sleep schedule? So you get the idea. This gives us a different way to think about disparities and how we as a society need to work to support one another to reduce the risk of dementia. So in some of these areas, we can make a change just as individuals. So you see the people here in this picture taking a dance class. That's a great thing to do at any age. It gives us that cognitive challenge. It keeps us socially connected. It gives us exercise. However, that kind of challenge that we take on maybe as adults or older adults, it doesn't make up for all those years of school. So having good schools open to all children is also incredibly important, and that's something we need to do as a society. Now I'd like to focus the lens one more time. So remember our camera. We're going to focus one more time on the individual person perspective. And I want to make a few comments about that. So your individual risk is not necessarily the same as your group's risk. I've given you lots of statistics, and maybe for some of you, you are thinking, oh, I'm in a high-risk group and feeling worried. I want to let you know those statistics only are true for large groups of people. For you as an individual, your risk is based on your own health, your family's health, your life situation, your health behaviors, and so much more. So it may be that you're part of a group with higher risk, but you yourself might not have a higher risk. Each person is unique. So as we go through our afternoon and we're talking about cultural patterns, we need to keep in mind that not everyone follows those patterns. I want you to think for a moment about someone you know who might not follow some of the cultural patterns of their group. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you know. We are all different. We're all complicated people, and we have many facets. So I've been talking about groups as if they're separate, but someone may have a parent who's part of one ethnicity or race and another parent who's part of another. A person might be part of the LGBTQIA+ community, for example, and that could affect their experience of living with dementia or getting access to healthcare and services. So people have many facets. And finally, effective support is always going to focus on the individual. So it's very good to learn about cultural patterns and disparities, but then when we're working to support a specific person, we really need to focus the lens on that individual sitting with us and listen to them. And I just want to go back to a point I made before, which is to keep in mind that people can live well with dementia. And these are pictures from Dementia Action Alliance. Their information is in the resource list. And that always has to be our goal, is to support people in living well with dementia. Okay, so now I want to come back to this issue of talking about dementia, because we've talked about a lot of different kinds of barriers and disparities. And as you know, people living with dementia and their families and friends need a lot of different kinds of support, but we're going to focus in on talking about dementia because it really is the gateway to knowledge and support. In fact, the World Alzheimer's Report that just came out found that information about dementia is the critical factor that is most needed worldwide. I think once we have more conversation and less stigma, then we will learn what else is needed and be able to move forward. So let's talk about what the barriers are to talking. And, you know, the first one is fear, because people are more afraid of dementia than they are afraid of cancer and heart disease. Several surveys have shown that. Fear leads to silence and stigma. And this has an impact not just at the individual level. At the launch of the World Alzheimer's Report, one of the speakers was Maikutlo Mabile from Botswana, who has started the conversation about dementia in her country. She started the first nonprofit dedicated to Alzheimer's and dementia in Botswana. And she talked about meeting with the health ministry and that there was some discomfort or resistance to taking steps. And her comment was, people resist what they do not know. So we have this problem of fear, silence, and stigma. And then because there is that silence, people don't know about it, they don't feel comfortable talking about it, and they back away. The next barrier here is late or no diagnosis. So because there's silence, because there's stigma, very often people do not seek medical help. They don't get a diagnosis at all, or they get it very late, and then it's hard to get help and support. There are language barriers. You'll hear about that from our community partners, not just what language people speak, but also health literacy. So is someone able to understand the information that's provided? Even if it's in their language, it may be written in a way that is easier for medical staff to understand and hard for just everyday people to understand. Geographic barrier. Not everyone lives in an area where they have access to neurologists or other specialists who might be able to help with a little bit more of a complicated diagnosis or where they can get services. Lack of cultural services. So because of all the silence and fear, it's extremely important for people to have a trusted place to go for help. And in many areas, there is not something in that culture. Whoops, I'm so sorry. I don't know why it keeps jumping forward like this, but let me get there. So related to that, there may be few providers who are from the cultural and linguistic community. So people don't see someone who looks like them, who they feel comfortable with. There are also community providers who do have that language and cultural connection, but may not have the training in dementia. This is something we talked about a lot in our community providers group is, for example, there are many small day programs that are run by immigrant communities. And so they have that language and cultural connection for the older adults whom they serve, but they may not have any training on dementia. And so they may not know how to handle situations that come up for one of their participants who's living with dementia. Belief systems. So many communities have a belief that dementia is not a disease, it's just a normal part of aging. So people may not get support. And there are also communities that have belief that it's due to something bad the person's done, that it's something to be ashamed of. And of course, that also prevents reaching out and getting help. There are also communities that have beliefs that dementia should not be stigmatized, and that older people are treasured and should be supported. So there are positive beliefs as well. Trauma. So when you think about immigrants or other groups of people who have experienced trauma, maybe they've experienced discrimination or racism, discrimination because of being part of a gender or sexual orientation minority and so forth, they may have trauma that makes it harder for them to feel confident reaching out for support. Legacy of discrimination we've talked about, and financial barriers as well. It can be really hard to find the time and resources to reach out and get support around dementia. So what else? So please, I invite you to put in the chat any other comments you have about barriers to open communication about dementia. Denial, I see. Thank you. Yeah. Judgment, family denial. Absolutely. Lack of family support, taboo. Yep. And these things, fear, yep, these things sort of can create a cycle because they make it hard to talk about it. And then because we don't talk about it, it feels very scary. So today really is all about helping us find ways to break that silence. And this is the goal. This is a quote from Sandy Halpern, who's living with dementia. And he says, I am eager to see all those living with dementia and their care partners break through the barrier wall of stigma to live the most fulfilling and productive lives. That's our goal. Breaking through that wall is not the same for everybody. For some people, it means becoming an advocate, or we can use the term a self-advocate, meaning someone with dementia who becomes an advocate for themselves. This can be a very empowering experience for someone living with dementia. It can provide a lot of meaning and purpose in life. For the public, it can be the single most powerful way to reduce stigma. When people hear from someone directly who's living with dementia, they can change their mind about what dementia means. And I want to just share the logos of some organizations that have really good resources to help people meet other peers who are living with dementia and to find their voice as advocates. And these are all in the resource list. In the resource list, you'll often also find a toolkit developed by the STRIDE program, which is working with people in the UK, Brazil, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Jamaica, Mexico, and South Africa, which has a number of videos, interviews with people living with dementia. So there's a lot of resources out there for those who want to connect with others, who want to become self-advocates, and also for those of you who want to share the voices of people living with dementia. However, not everyone is going to wish to become an advocate in this public way. This is something we talked about in our community partners group, that this is not a cultural fit for everybody, and it's not a fit for everyone individually. But what everyone needs is to be able to communicate in order to seek information and support. So we need to break the silence for everyone to be able to do those things. And this is why it is so important to have a trusted community member be the one to provide education and awareness about dementia. In these photos, you see Inayadia and Ayaroda, who led the very first Dementia Friends Massachusetts sessions in Arabic. And this is just an example of how community partners, people who are trusted in the community, are really so important to make this change, to break this silence. So I'm just about to wrap up here. I just want to orient you a little bit to Dementia Friends, because that is the way that our project is breaking the silence around dementia. It's a global public awareness initiative There are 2 steps. It's very simple. First, we train community members to be what we call champions, and then champions lead a 1-hour interactive workshop about dementia in their community. And Jewish Family and Children's Service, which runs Dementia Friends Massachusetts, has contracted with community partners since 2019. And we've really found that community partners are the key to getting this information out to many geographic and cultural and linguistic communities. How did we choose which communities to focus on? So we looked at communities with a demonstrated higher risk of dementia. For example, Black, African American communities, Latino/Hispanic communities, people with Down syndrome. We looked at the population of Massachusetts to see which populations had limited English proficiency. And we talked to a lot of people, a lot of individuals and organizations to find who was interested. And so it was really a combination of outreach and building on existing relationships. Certainly, this is a work in progress. We have not reached nearly all of the communities in Massachusetts, and this is an ongoing process. I also want to mention that the International Association for Indigenous Aging runs Dementia Friends for American Indian and Alaska Native communities nationwide, and their contact information is in the resource list. So with that, I'm so delighted to introduce our community partners. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of our community partners, and then you can see their full biographies in the program book. So I will just go through this list of wonderful folks, and then I'm going to introduce Nia Mossacero after that, and she will share her story a bit, and then we'll have our community partners roundtable. I'm going to pause here. I thank our interpreters. I know I'm talking fast to catch up because we've had some technical issues. Just going to let you take a breather. So I'm so pleased to introduce Arnetta E. Beatty, who is board chair, and Carl Byron Beatty, who is executive director of Rounding the Bases Incorporated, a nonprofit based in Dorchester, Massachusetts that supports community members around training, education, employment, and housing. They have worked with Dementia Friends Massachusetts since 2019. Bonnie Berman is the president of the Ohio Council for Cognitive Health, home of Dementia Friends Ohio. Bonnie, Marty Williman, and their team developed the version of Dementia Friends for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that Kathy Service has modified and is using here in Massachusetts. Bonnie was gracious to join us here today to add her voice to this conversation. Kun Chang, LCSW, is the Associate Director of the Greater Boston Chinese Golden Age Center, an organization that provides comprehensive wellness services to Asian older adults and family members, including housing, nutrition, day programs, transportation, and caregiver support. As you will hear later, Kun has been instrumental in the community partner work of Dementia Friends Massachusetts from the start. He and his team provide education in Mandarin and Cantonese. Alana Dundon worked as a psychologist, organizational consultant, and human resources manager in Brazil before coming to the United States. She now works as a bilingual outreach coordinator at a center for older adults, and she was a longtime caregiver for a family member who lived with dementia. She has worked with Dementia Friends Massachusetts since 2019, providing education in Portuguese. Tirsa Ramirez is a patient navigator and health educator at the Latino Health Insurance Program, a community-based provider of medical and dental care, education, and advocacy. Tirsa also serves as the pastor and leader of women's ministry for a church serving the Spanish-speaking community, and she has worked with Dementia Friends for the last year and a half, providing education in Spanish. Ray moved to the US from a refugee camp in Thailand on the border of Myanmar 10 years ago. He is a business administration student and conducts community outreach at the Southeast Asian Coalition of Central Massachusetts. Is the president of the Worcester, Myanmar community. He has worked with Dementia Friends since 2021. Along with his colleagues, he provides education in Burmese, Karenni, and Vietnamese. Kathy Service has worked in the field of intellectual and developmental disabilities since 1976. She is a nurse practitioner and was one of the first nurses nationally to be certified in the specialty of developmental disabilities nursing. Kathy has served on local, national, and international advisory boards, including the National Task Group on Dementia and Intellectual Disabilities. She has worked with Dementia Friends for a few years and since 2021 has been focusing on providing dementia education for participants with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Judith Thermidor is Resident Wellness Director at CSI Support and Development Services. Judith trained as a physician in Mexico, France, and the US, and is completing a master's in Aging Services Management. She has worked with Dementia Friends since 2021, and she leads dementia education in Haitian Creole, Spanish, and English. She also leads the development of partnerships with medical institutions to enable residents to access services and to participate in clinical trials. And now I'm delighted to introduce Ms. Anitra Nia Mostasero. Nia is living with dementia after having been diagnosed in 2017. I met her through the National Council of Black Dementia Minds, which is part of the National Council of Dementia Minds. And I am grateful to Nia for joining our community partners meeting to develop today's program, and grateful that she will share her story with us today. Because at the center of this conversation, we need the voices of people who are living with dementia, along with those who care about them and other experts. So with that, Nia, I will give you the floor.
Great. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I want to take you on a journey of my dementia diagnosis. It started during my last 2 years of active duty when I began noticing problems with my memory and coordination. In various job-related roles, I found myself making errors in my paperwork, missing meetings, and forgetting things. I often felt as though my troops and my commander were taking care of me more than I was taking care of them. A turning point for me came one day when I forgot how to start my car. Alarmed, I raised my concerns to my primary care manager, and they referred me to a mental health care professional. Initially, the doctors attributed my symptoms to job-related stress and depression, although I also was experiencing hallucinations and sleepwalking. After seeing a series of specialists, an endocrinologist, neuropsychologist, rheumatologist, and sleep specialist, my neurologist ordered a PET scan, and the scan revealed brain atrophy related to Alzheimer's disease. When I received my diagnosis, my neurologist looked sadder than I did. He said that he only had a handful of patients my age with Alzheimer's disease, and I was shocked as well because I thought the disease only affected older people. From that experience, I learned that you need to listen to your body and be a strong advocate for yourself. I knew I was experiencing something more than stress, and I thought that maybe I had a brain tumor because I was just that much off. Alzheimer's never crossed my mind. My doctor recommended I contact the Alzheimer's Association for information and resources, and he encouraged me to get my affairs in order. I also watched the 2014 film, Still Alice, and it was like looking in a mirror. And in 2022, I was diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalopathy and traumatic brain injury. The damage was done. Through my local Alzheimer's Association chapter, I joined a support group, which was very helpful. and I helped organize the younger onset support group for people in early stage of the disease under 65 years of age. I've also taken steps to address my future, creating a will, establishing a power of attorney and advanced care directive, all at the request of my neurologist. I live independently, but I have since hired a housekeeper to help me with my chores. Taking steps to address my future has given me a peace of mind, and putting plans in place while you still can is important to really help reduce your stress. I tell people that your life is not over just because you have a dementia diagnosis. Your future may look different from what you planned, but you can still have a fulfilling life, just as I do. My advice to others facing this disease is to tell those that you love that you cherish them. Keep making memories, put together a bucket list, and get cracking. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Nia. That's such important and inspiring words, and we're really grateful that you're here with us. And I see many people commenting in the chat with appreciation for you. Get cracking, says Cindy. So thank you. I know we were having a problem with the Vietnamese channel, and I hope that it is working now. I apologize for anyone that's having difficulty. Nia, I hope you can look at the chat and see all the wonderful appreciation for you there.
I want to add also that Deb wrote, thank you for your service, Nia.
Yes. Thank you so much. So what I'd like to do now is bring on the rest of our community partners. So Jessica's going to spotlight folks, and we will begin our conversation. So just take a moment. And we're going to discuss 4 questions that will help to give everyone a sense of the needs and the resources, the strengths, the challenges that are specific to many different cultural communities represented here. So we're going to have about an hour, a little more than an hour of discussion, and then we'll take a break at that point, let you stretch. So I'm delighted to see our community partners here on screen. And I'm going to ask the first question, and we'll start with Judith, who bravely was willing to start, and then we'll just go around and hear from our community partners. And as I said to them, I want this to be more of a conversation. It's always a little hard to do that on Zoom. So at any point, if any of the community partners want to add something, I can see you. So you can always raise your hand, and that'll help me know that I should come back to you. So when people in your community hear the word dementia, what does this mean to them? And when you answer, please let us know the community or communities that you're serving. So can I go to you first, Judith?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Judith, and I'm the Resident Wellness Director at CSI Support and Development, and I'm educating Haitian communities, Latinos community, and Black African communities. Dementia means fear, memory loss, but the most important, I realized that people, they found hope. What Beth just mentioned during her presentation, that research is a good tools to address dementia. And now the community, the Asian community right now, are very engaged, motivated to participate in research. And we enroll in 5 kind of research with medical institutions around Boston, and people, they want to know more about that. So I think that's a really very bring hope to the community. It's not about only fear, but they feel they have power to address dementia. They can bring more in clinical trials, they can get more information, and they can share stories and information to other people, their church or their children, and they think about taking decisions on about life, as you mentioned, Nia. So make your list, what you want at the end of the life, what you have to focus about your financial, will be responsible. So that's very grateful that people, they are taking care or they are taking steps to move forward with dementia and they can live well.
Thank you, Judith. And I'm going to come to you next, Kun. I think that you're making an important point, which is what people in your community think about dementia changes when you help them have information and some steps they can take. Then it changes and people can feel more hope and less fear. So thank you, Judith. Go ahead, Kun.
Okay, I'm represent the Asian and Chinese community. Let me share a few stories. First, I heard someone some people in Chinatown told me that my mom was getting old and become 老糊涂, 老糊涂. What that means is stupid, forgetful, old age. Another person say, it never occurred to me that my mom have Alzheimer's. Even I thought they have something wrong. So it's a lot of things they don't not sure. Another say something, friends suggest us to relocate our home because they thought my mom's craziness caused by the bad feng shui. Okay, so there are lots of misunderstanding that show you what the people living in our community, they're using other way to express the frustration, but never really want to admit this is something wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Kun. Those are very helpful examples of how many different ideas people can have about dementia when they have not had the opportunity to have some kind of training or education. Thank you. Alana, would you like to go next?
Yes. Actually, in Brazilian community, what we can listen more is they don't accept this disease because they think how somebody they love very well, love so much, will forget them. So this is the most thing they usually to say, you know. But after the session, I think they can understand that they can help them, and especially make these people as a very important person in their community, in their family. So they can understand a little bit more and make this a little bit easier to them.
Thank you, Alana. And to just explain a little bit about the sessions that Alana mentioned. So the people you see all lead Dementia Friends sessions, which are like workshops. They last about an hour. They focus on 5 key messages about dementia and some communication skills. So they're designed to be a way that people can learn some very important fundamental information about dementia. And Alana, it's really helpful to hear that learning that information changes the way people think about dementia. That's very similar to what Judith said, that once you do break the silence and help people understand and give them some ways that they can take action, they can feel more hopeful. And Kun, you know, I just noticed in the chat, someone said that they had worked in assisted living for 10 years, and someone said that it was the 5G network that caused their mother's dementia. So going back to what you said about feng shui, you know, when we don't have the information, when we don't have the opportunity to receive the information, we may believe a lot of different things. And it's important for people to have that chance to learn the correct information. Let's see, could I go to Kathy and then Bonnie, if Bonnie wants to add to what Kathy says.
Thank you. In my community includes both people with IDD, and IDD stands for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And it also includes the people who support and care for them in a variety of settings. And I think it's a little different world for me, for many people who don't know. People live in group homes, residential settings, they can live on their own. They're in day programs. So there are many different settings that people who have an intellectual or developmental disability are living. And so with this group of people, with people with IDD, dementia is a real abstract term. People don't really fully understand it. And what we have found that we really need to use much more tangible, concrete examples of and using people who are living with dementia that they may know, for instance, a family member or housemates, or even on TV. Lots of times I'll say, did you see that person on TV? What did you think about that? And so that's much more easier for people to understand. I have a friend who's in his 70s with an intellectual disability, and I could use my mother who had dementia as an example of what it means to be living with dementia. The other thing that around caregivers, and this is the difficult thing in the world of ID, is that we're so used to helping people grow and develop and to be the best they can be, that this idea of dementia is really one of disbelief, and people are not set for that. They weren't planning for this. And so that can be something that is really difficult for especially older family members and many people have children with Down syndrome who may get Alzheimer's disease at younger ages. So this is a difficult thing, and it's a lifelong commitment to their children. So that also is a hard thing to kind of wrap your neurons around. So I do think that, this understanding about providing supports, and I mean, the supports we provide for people are in the field of intellectual disabilities is a lot of choices, a lot of getting out in the community and doing things like this. And this doesn't always work for people who are living with dementia. So I think that that's the most difficult thing for a lot of people, is just trying to understand this almost basic change in philosophy. Bonnie, what do you think?
Well, I agree absolutely with everything you said, Kathy. I do want to piggyback kind of on 2 points. The first is your comment about using concrete examples. Many times we feel that we don't even use the word dementia. And someone, I think it was Michael Kincaid, just put into the chat that there's some cultures that don't even have a word for dementia. And I want to have a shout out that sometimes we don't need the word, or the word isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is to get people to understand what is going on. And that is often through examples. And so when we work with folks in the intellectual disability world, we try to talk much more about the symptoms and the behaviors and less about the word itself. And then the last thing I wanted to add is that thinking about the word dementia in the IDD community, we have to revisit it very often because we are learning so much more every day. And if we don't do that, people's information is going to be outdated. And I know it's moving fast in every field, but as Kathy will tell you, in this field, every day we're learning something new. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate what both of you said, and I think it's really important what you said, that sometimes the terms are not as important as the stories, being able to give examples and describe what is affecting people's lives and give them some tools for how to cope with that, even if we don't have a word exactly to call it. I do also want to mention that the Dementia Friends program, which is a global program administered by the Alzheimer's Society in the UK with 67 countries participating, has its roots in Japan's Dementia Supporter Program. And in fact, one of the first steps that was taken in Japan was to come up with a new word that was a more respectful, more accurate way to describe dementia. And then to use that new term as part of the public education that they began to do. So it's a really good point that Mike makes about the language. One other thought is just that dementia is becoming a bigger and bigger issue for us globally because people are living longer. And certainly that's true for the intellectual and developmentally disabled community where, maybe a generation ago, people weren't necessarily living long enough to develop dementia so frequently. But that's true for all communities as well. And that's part of why sometimes we're not ready because in the previous generations, it just wasn't as common. So we're needing to adapt. And rates of younger onset dementia are also growing. Thank you, Alan. We're, I think, fortunately becoming more aware. More people are getting diagnosed a bit earlier, but certainly there are a lot of people who are younger who are developing dementia. Arnetta, could we go to you next? You're on mute.
Okay, there I go.
Yeah, we hear you now.
Hi, my name is Arnetta Beatty, and I live in the Common Square neighborhood of Dorchester. I am a Dementia Friends champion. I have been one since 2019, and I am very proud that dementia came to the Black and Brown communities within the city of Boston, because a lot of our Black and Brown families and friends were afraid of the word dementia, the word Alzheimer's. In the old days when my mom was around, she passed away from dementia. We never called it dementia. We always called it old age disease, where you would take a family member, not put them in a home, but put them in a separate room in their house. And that's where they would stay majority of the time. And it was kind of downheartening. So by being a Dementia Friends champion and listening to Beth when she first introduced it to me, and then being able to do the information session so that I can inform other Black and Brown people in the African American communities about what dementia was, what Alzheimer's was, and showing them that this was something we no longer needed to be afraid of. We needed to embrace it, to understand what was going on in the world around us, where we could share it with others so that other families would get to know what dementia was, what Alzheimer's was, and how to look at it through a different light through their family members that were getting older, wandering away from home. I just want to give you one example of a senior that I know. He's in his 90s, and his wife knows he has dementia. His daughter knows he has dementia, but he was not, he didn't want to be labeled as such a person. He went for a drive one day, and they figured he would just go to the store and come back. But the police found him about 20 miles from the Canadian border because he had ran out of gas. He was in the car by himself. So even though we look at people different in the Black and Brown communities, we are all very much the same. We just need to keep an eye out for our seniors, our, as I call them, our seasoned seniors, those that are 70 plus, that sometimes walk away from the house and don't come back when we expect them to, or those that go for a drive and take too long coming back, or those that just live across the street from you. You just need to sometimes take up a conversation with them and help them to understand what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnetta. And thank you for bringing it home to the personal level with family stories, because that is where the, that is what we need to talk about, is how this affects individuals and families. And Thank you. I see some good resources going into the chat. But again, the first step to getting more resources available and helping people find them is being able to talk about it. So thank you for those points you made. Let's go to Tirsa and then to Saw.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi experiencia como tuve que yo cuidar a mi madre y la verdad que hay un tabú en lo que es los latinos y también cuando las personas no son educadas en este tema, hay mucha frustración. Entonces creo que como yo lo viví, de ver también a mis hermanos, muchos de ellos no lo aceptan. Latino es callado, no acepta que uno de sus familiares le vaya a pasar este problema.
Tirsa, pausa un momento. I think yours debe estar en el canal de español.
Sí, estoy en el canal de español escuchando muy.
Oh, there we go. So I think Tirsa is going to speak on the Spanish channel, and then Stephanie or Rosemary is going to interpret in English.
Okay,
Can one of the Spanish interpreters come on the English channel? Okay. Go ahead, Tirsa. Go ahead and speak on the Spanish channel. And if others could just wait for a moment.
¿Me puede escuchar? ¿Sí? ¿Me escuchan?
Okay, yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Qué bueno, gracias.
Okay, thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
En mi caso,
In my case,
soy educadora de demencia FREN y
I am an educator of
Eu
dementia
sou
and the
educadora
study
de demência e eu
that
estudo educo as pessoas.
educates the people.
Todas as
All
pessoas
people
na minha
in
casa
my
podiam
case, I
cuidar da
took
minha
care of my
mãe
mother, and
e
there was
sempre
always
tinha
that
esse
fear and
medo,
frustration
frustração
when
quando
one is
não
not
era
educated.
educado.
And I think that
E a
dementia,
demência, quando
when we are educated in it, we can help our family. And one of the things that helped me some of my family did not accept it, and some families don't accept it, but education will help us help our family members. I was able to take care of my mother until she went up to heaven, and it's very hard and painful, but I can see that but there is a silence among people, especially among family members. And I work with a lot of Latins, and Latins suffer very much over this. But this silence is affects your heart, however, but I think I'm working a lot with a lot of people. This week I had to work with 4. One was very frustrated because there's no family help. The other one is a member of the church, and she cries and she doesn't know what to do because her mother is over at her country. And as we're teaching this education about this and this process, and it's something that needs to reach our family members.
Thank you, Tirsa. And thank you to
Gracias, Tirsa.
Stephanie or Rosemary. Thank you. Saw, how about you?
Okay, thank you. My name is Saw Ren from SIG, Southeast Asia Coalition. And here in SIG, my role is global community organizer. And for dementia, I just work with the Burmese community in Worcester, a small group. And my colleague Tracy, she worked with the Vietnamese community. So to ask a back question, in my community, when they hear the word dementia, most people in our community say that the dementia is for really, really old people, and the dementia is for people who are very forgetful and do not know or remember what is did or what they just said. As some people say, your community say that the person is crazy, something like that. So, this is just small community group. Burmese. Most people are from Thailand and Burma. They came here as a refugee families. Thank you.
Thank you, Saw. And your comment brings me back to Nia, because that was one of the, Saw is saying there's often a perception that people are very old when they develop dementia. And so I wonder, do you want to make any comment about being a younger person and how you had to deal with people's lack of understanding or lack of awareness that someone can develop dementia when they're younger?
Sure. I agree with Saw and Ms. Arnetta 100%. But coming from a younger perspective, I think that it is more difficult because people do believe that it is an old person's disease, when we know that statistically it shows signs decades even before you are possibly diagnosed.
Thank you. So let's go to our next question now, which is to think about the experiences you've had when you are teaching about dementia. So for most of you, this is when you were doing your information session, your Dementia Friends workshops. For Ms. Nia, it would be in your role as an advocate. Can you think of one thing or a couple of things that have been most surprising to the people that you educated? What were the pieces of information about dementia that really surprised them and made a difference? And I'll start with Judith. Oh, I'm sorry, Nia. Do you want to go first, Nia, and then we'll go to Judith?
Sure. I think that one of the things that surprised people besides my age is the fact that it's not just your memory, that it's often coordination problems, behavioral problems, hallucinations, things like that, sleep problems, that it's not just your memory.
Thank you. That's a very important point. Go ahead, Judith.
Yes, so the most surprising information is the treatment for dementia is still in research. So in the marketplace, especially in underserved community, there is a lot of misinformation. If you take that, if you do that, misinformation. So that was very surprising. They realized the treatment is still on research and they got it so they can avoid fraud and scam in the community, make people think that if they are doing certain things, that's not bad, but however, it's not a treatment for dementia.
Thank you, Judith. I think that you each just made such important points about the role of information and knowledge. Judith, you're pointing out that even though we don't have the treatments yet that we wish we would have, and we know the research community is working hard toward that goal, knowledge can help people to avoid some false treatments that might be presented to them that might be harmful or maybe not harmful, but not helpful. Because there is a lot of false information out there. So when people are given accurate information, they can protect themselves. And I just wanted to comment, Ms. Nia, on what you had said about people not realizing that there are many symptoms, not just memory loss. If someone doesn't know that, they might judge somebody. They might think that the person is exhibiting a symptom for a different reason, and they might not respond in a helpful way. They might respond in a harmful way. So again, that knowledge and information is really important. Or as Daria says, someone might think a person's doing it on purpose because they don't understand it's caused by the disease. So I'm going to try to go in the same order that we went before. So let's go to Kuhn next. Is there something that's been most surprising to the people that you've educated?
You can see many people in our community has a misunderstanding about is just thinking this is just normal aging, this is part of the aging process. So never really see this as disease. So they also saying that people feel I want to distance myself or from this particular person, maybe because if I would together with this person, the person, where I may be affected. So there's sometimes a lot of misunderstanding about this. So it's very clear. We try to deliver messages, say, this is a brain disease. It's nothing wrong about their life, their feng shui, there's something else. It is something, is just sometimes we have a disease, heart disease, high blood pressure, all those things. It's just one of these. That's the key message we say we try to continue promote to tell people about that. Because in our community, sometimes people want to label people, okay? When they label people, they the family also want to be protected. So they never want to have someone, their loved one, have that situation, has any outside contact, because they feel that shame, because something wrong about my family. But if they see this as a disease, they maybe change the whole mindset. This is a long way to go in our community. Continue education is the key. Continue to promote the key message, hopefully can gradually change their belief. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuhn. Let's go to Alana next. Oh, you're on mute, Alana.
In fact, in my community, they understand almost exclusively as forgetfulness, you know. And one thing that they used to say is, this person with dementia is become a child again. And I try to explain to them, no, they are not child again. They are adult and they have this disease. Explain why, what happened, what the signs, and how we have to treat, not treat them as a child, you know? And because most people used to say that. So they start to treat them as a child. And it's not the way we have to do with them, you know? It's like that.
Thank you, Alana. That's such an important point to make. And I think for most adults, if they're treated as a child, it feels disrespectful. And not everyone can communicate how they feel about that because of the symptoms of dementia. If someone has more advanced dementia, they might have trouble expressing themselves, but they still feel it. They still feel that disrespect, and it causes problems in the relationship, and it causes problems for their quality of life. And so that teaching is so valuable that you're doing. Let's see, Arnetta, would you like to comment on the question of what has been surprising to people that you've taught?
I would have to say that most of the families and individuals that we've had the listening sessions with, the informational sessions, in person as well as on Zoom, is they find it surprising that dementia can run in the family. They don't quite understand when it started or how it started and what's grandma, mom or dad or grandpa, or auntie or uncle is going through. But one of their first questions when we do this information session is that, can I develop dementia? Can I develop Alzheimer's? How do I tell? Because of all the, I don't want to say bad publicity, but because of former research methods on the Black communities, a lot of Black individuals are afraid to go and find out about themselves. They're afraid to go to the hospitals or even tell their doctors what they're experiencing. Afraid of being labeled, pretty much like our children are labeled when they first go into school. So I think that's one of the most challenging for the Black and Brown communities that I've witnessed and talked about in our information sessions.
Great. Thank you, Arnetta. I just noticed some comments in the chat about using approaches to communicate with people and to create a sense of community that don't require language. So art and music. And Arnetta, we've collaborated a lot on memory cafes, which are places that usually people are doing creative activities. And it's a good point that that sometimes can be a nice way to form connections when language gets difficult. And we can talk more about that as time allows, and I'm glad to see some resources being shared in the chat. So let's go next to Kathy and then Bonnie. What has been surprising to the people that you've led the training for?
Well, I think when I led the training for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that's the group I've led this particular training for. The thing that I've had to kind of reinforce in people to help people to understand is that the behaviors that they see in people, which are usually distressing behaviors, they take that personally and they think that the individuals are doing things on purpose, etc. So I need to remind people, and this has to be reinforced, that it's not, it's a disease. And the other thing that some of the people have asked, oh, am I going to catch it? They were worried about catching it from somebody else. So I think that's the other thing that we have to kind of explain, that it's not that kind of disease, not like an infection. So you have to be being simplistic and bringing it down so that people can understand that people aren't, you know, it's a disease, it's things that are happening that the person doesn't have control over. And it's not, they're not just doing this to get back at you or something like that. So I think that's one of the things that those particular participants, but to kind of go back to what many of the other people are speaking about is this whole change. I mean, it's not, for many of the people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's not often we see memory initially. We'll see change, a big change, and it's usually changes in behavior. So that has to be fully investigated and kind of understood. And the problem with that in our field, especially with, you know, we have a number of people, for instance, with the Down syndrome or younger onset dementia, is that because, you know, the word is out that people with Down syndrome get Alzheimer's disease, that anybody who shows a change in behavior, even at age 19 and 20, they have dementia, where they don't get the full assessment that people deserve to get. And so that, I mean, I've had people recently, somebody asked me about a 30-year-old person with autism. There are things happening where we think the person has dementia. So I think part of it, even though we're glad to have that information out there, but it also has to be approached thoughtfully and carefully and for people, because I've had people in their 19 and 20s that just automatically get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, when in fact, when later more assessment is done, it turns out it may be something like depression or hypothyroidism or something like that. Bonnie?
Well, to piggyback on what Kathy said, what has been most useful to the participants, and in this case, I mean either the family members or those individuals who are working with those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, is the simple information about how to communicate. And people are just so surprised that these little simple things you can do in the way you communicate can make such an incredible difference for somebody living with dementia. And it's also something that's so easy to try, and immediately you'll have success. So it's very exciting. The most surprising thing that we have found is that people are just shocked that there is so much that they can do to help somebody who is living with dementia, because the message that, as everyone has said, that is out there is that this is a death sentence and there's nothing you can do. And what the message that we send is, oh, no, 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 there is so much you can do to help somebody live with purpose and meaning and joy. And so it is really changing that frame that is, I think, the most surprising to them. They have no idea.
Thank you, Kathy and Bonnie, incredibly helpful. So let's go to Tirsa and then to Saw. Tirsa, do you want to share what has surprised people who you've educated about dementia, or what has been important for them to learn?
Sí. ¿Me escuchan bien?
Yes, can you hear me well?
Sí, algo que
Something that we have been able to teach to the participants, and they have been very satisfied about this, is that they have been able to understand their family members. And the fact that this is a process that we have to accept the condition of the patient. Once, for example, if they say that something is black, you need to understand what they're trying to say and go along with that. Those classes have been teaching the patients on how to have a better quality of life, because the participants have been able to understand those classes, that it's a memory loss, that they can understand better their family members. And I think it's been a success to have those sessions with the family members. They feel more comfortable and prepared because there's a guide that helps them to be better caregivers in their communities.
Thank you, Tirsa. That's really very helpful and important to focus in on the communication skills. And again, the point that even though there isn't a medication right now that would cure the causes of dementia, there's so much we can do to help people live well with dementia, to help family members and friends to understand, so that those relationships can stay strong. So thank you for that. And Saw, what would you say has been surprising or important for the people you've educated?
In my dementia friend session, most people are really happy and grateful to know the basics about dementia. And some people were surprised that everyone can get dementia, not only for the old people. And also watching the videos about dementia and people in the videos sharing their experience is useful, and it's inspiring people to live stronger. Because of the videos, some people in our community are willing to help and support dementia friends, and willing to be more patient with their family elders. Thank you.
Thank you, Saw. And actually, I have one more question for you, Saw, because I know that you and your colleagues have done some training with children, with young people. And I wonder what has that been like? Have they been surprised or interested? What has been their reaction to the training?
For the children, when we read to the book to the children, I not usually ask questions or work with them. I have a colleague that read to them. So when I see the children, some children are really listening, what to learn. I think they're interested. Some are moving around. Yeah, for the youth like high school day for the youth, they are also excited to know too. They all say that it's good to know. Yeah, this is I think what they say they do not hear from others. This is like the first time they get educated for us, something like that.
Thank you, San. Thank you for you and your colleagues doing that work with children, because it's very important to begin this education young and to make it more comfortable for everyone in a family to understand and talk about what may affect their whole family. And please do keep putting your comments and questions in the chat. At 4 o'clock, we're going to focus on your comments and questions. And in some cases, we're able to speak about them as we go, but in some cases, they go by very quickly. So my colleague is monitoring the chat, and we're going to have 25 minutes to respond to as many of your questions and comments as possible starting at 4 o'clock. So I wanted to now go to our next question, which is to ask, what does your community need the most when it comes to dementia? What are the barriers that you see that are the most important, or what are the needs, the gaps that are most important right now? If you could pick one or two things that you would like to see changed, what would those be for your community? Judith, would you start?
Yes, Beth. The first challenge is lack of assessment for dementia in a primary care level in the community. And I'm serving older adults population. So what I'm saying is aging in place is a priority for public health. However, when older adults has dementia, unfortunately, the only or the unique destination is nursing home. So it's like accelerate the transition from home to nursing home. So I would like to see more tools and resources that they can age in their own apartment and delay the nursing home just because someone has dementia.
Thank you, Judith. Let's go to Kuhn next.
Okay, most important, continue education. Knowledge is power. Without knowing that, not going to anywhere. So helping people understand the disease, learn how to live and work with the dementia. But furthermore, I think very important to building the capacity. We need more bilingual, bicultural service provider. Especially, we also need to continue to support frontline worker, such a home health aide, homemaker, community service worker. They are on the front line. They don't pay that much. So they're not able to attract certain people to join as a quality service. And we see that overwhelming the workload situation, people frustrated, hard to serve. So how to build so-called capacity building, to build the capacity in the community level, not just Asian community. I believe this is among all the community face the same issue to create sense of incentive. Cannot be just you have a good heart. You have to have financially support and also able to continue to increase the capacity to serve all community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuhn. And I think during the pandemic, conditions have become even harder for direct care providers. And we see a huge shortage of people who are able to do that work. In many cases, there are people who want to do that work, but they can't afford to because their pay is so low, their working conditions are so hard that it just becomes very difficult to keep those jobs. And as you said, it's very important to support those people and build that capacity and the bilingual, bicultural capacity. And Judith, I think this relates to what you said too, because we need that capacity to give people more options where they can continue to live in place and get help along the way so they don't have to move to a residence right away if they can just get some help at home. Let's go to Alana next.
I totally agree with Kuhn. Yes. And we need education because the Brazilian community need to know about the services we have there, they don't know about. And yes, the financial is a big problem. And in my community, they think they have to take care of their loved ones. So they don't know sometimes what intense is this process, what will become. So they should have to take care of their families. And the biggest barrier they encounter is leave their loved ones in nursing homes. They don't want to do that at all. But sometimes we don't have other option.
Thank you, Alana. And let's go to Arnetta next.
Excuse me. I would have to say training on both ends. We need more training, not only for the communities in which we serve. We need more champions to help get the word out to the families. We need more people that are interested in sharing the information about dementia, about Alzheimer's, that families need to know what is going on with other family members. There are a few champions, Dementia Friends champions within the neighborhood where I live, and they are in English, Haitian Creole, and other Caribbean languages, but they're all so very busy that a lot of the training falls on in my lap. So I would like to see more people, even if it's a family member that wants to be trained come to an information session and be trained as a dementia friend, so that they're able to share, especially in the BHA housing developments. You know, there are a lot of people living in developments much like what Judith talked about and what Kuhn talked about, but those developments, the BHA developments, don't have anyone other than a few people that can come around and tell them, or get them to come to a Zoom meeting and tell them about dementia. So I'd like to see more training on both levels.
Thank you, Arnetta. And I think that's a really important point on so many levels. And I just noticed in the chat somebody asking about resources, culturally competent resources. And I want to just mention, you know, I think what I have found with Dementia Friends is that it does come down to the people. So we do need the resources, we need the translated materials and so forth. You know, we need teaching tools, but in the end, we need people who are part of those communities who can actually do what Arnett is talking about and lead the trainings, because that's where the trust is people who are part of that community. So the last presentation today is going to focus on that, and that we need to have structures to compensate people so that they can do that work. And Elba, I see your question, and in fact, we're going to talk a little bit about that later, about how people can step into a champion role or a leadership role. So let's now go to Kathy and Bonnie.
Yeah, and I can't help but echo what everybody's saying about education and having evidence-based education for people to understand, and especially in the field of intellectual and developmental disabilities. As Bonnie said, the information is constantly being updated as more and more research is being done. The other thing that people need to have is, besides the education, and it's community awareness, and also healthcare providers to be educated. And there was something in the chat about educating healthcare providers, and as far as I know, there's not as much done in the field of healthcare because there's so much information that students need to have. So championing that and making opportunities available for any nurses, doctors, anybody in allied healthcare practitioners around dementia. So that's also important. The other thing I wanted to add is that families especially need support and information. But the thing that I have found with a lot of family members is navigation, trying to figure out how to find somebody, where to go, what the initials stand for if you go into an organization, even bridging the gaps between the aging and the intellectual disability communities, and also the Alzheimer's community. So trying to have people with specialties be able to talk to people. So those are things that I think are really important. And the barriers that I have is that in the field of IDD is that there's so many competing demands and who gets funded. It's like queen for a day, I hate to say. So how do we advocate for people to get the funding that they need to have, and also for direct care, people who are providing hands-on support. There are so many people that we really need to have people, so they need to get paid adequately, and they also need the education and understanding. Bonnie?
So I'm going to drill down as usual on what Kathy has said and focus specifically on physicians and advanced practice nurses. And in the dementia and IDD field, we have a unique problem that I actually think is not so unique now that I'm thinking about it. And that is, we have clinicians who have been caring for somebody for their Down syndrome or whatever the issues are, and then they get dementia symptoms. And oftentimes that one clinician is going to pass the person off to the next. So it's going to go from someone who was an IDD specialist, and now they're seeing a dementia specialist, and the two of them are not speaking to each other. And so they're each looking at one part of them, and no one is looking and caring about the person. And so I don't think it's actually that unique, in that most people who have dementia also have other comorbid conditions. And so what happens when the oncologist is not talking to the neurologist, or we don't really recognize the symptoms because it's an oncologist? So we really worry about that in our field. So what we need most is the communication between the different providers so that they can care for the whole person. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Bonnie. Very important points. And I'll just mention, I saw a question about this in the chat. Massachusetts, where most of us here are based, Bonnie's joining us from Ohio and Nia from Idaho, but the rest of us are in Massachusetts. We are an unusual state in that in 2018, our state government passed a law requiring continuing medical education about dementia for doctors and nurses and some other allied health professionals. And it's hard to implement because, as you said, there are competing demands. There are so many pressures on people doing this work. They often have very brief amounts of time with their patients. So it's hard to achieve, but at least we're moving in that direction here in Massachusetts, and I hope other states will do the same. I think when that legislation was being debated, people were shocked to hear that it wasn't already the case that medical professionals had to learn something about dementia, but they didn't necessarily have to. So we are moving in that direction. And thank you for keep chatting, everybody. I see such great things in the chat. So let's go to Tirsa and then Saw and Nia. I'd also love to come back to you as well after that and just ask what needs you see, what would be something you'd most want to see change. So let's go to Tirsa. What do you see as important needs in your community around dementia?
Yo veo la
I
necesidad
see the necessity in the Latin community that we need, that the same thing everybody has said, is support, education, and one of the members of my church has her mother. She's very frustrated and she calls me all the time. What can we do? And what can we do to motivate families so that they can unite in this area of taking care of their family members? Sometimes you can see that the person who's taking care of this patient is left only to that one person. And I think that in my case, when I took care of my parents, thank God the doctor was a great person. And when he realized that when my brothers would go to the doctor, he would enforce that my family members help me with the care of my family. But there's many other people that don't have this backup by their family. So it's very important that doctors get involved in this and give some kind of reference to this, because this patient tells me that the doctor hasn't said anything to the other family members. This is going to get worse. So I think education, like Judith has mentioned and Kathy has mentioned, that we do need education, that doctors can help and refer information to family members to help the caregiver itself. I think we need to have the family help us.
Thank you, Tirsa. So I'm hearing so much about navigation and coordination among family members. So it's not just one person who is involved and other family members maybe stepping back. Navigation of resources so that when a person is diagnosed with dementia, they know where to go to get help and support and live life well. Coordination among doctors and other healthcare providers, especially when the person may have more than one medical condition, which is very common. So this is a theme that's coming up, is that coordination. And there are some really great types of services out there that help people navigate and coordinate. They're just not everywhere. They're not accessible in all languages and in all communities. So we need more of that. So let's go to Saw and then Nia.
Thank you. For my community, most parents in our community cannot read or write English or even their own language at home because they have never been to school. So the language barrier is one thing. And I think our community needs more people or someone who can communicate with them in their language to teach them about dementia or to guide them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saw. And, I think it's such an important reminder that even if there are good resources available, not everyone can access them because of language barriers, because of literacy barriers, and other barriers, geographic, financial, some of these other barriers we've discussed. So we have to keep asking who is missing, who is not using these services, and then how do we identify the barriers and remove the barriers. Nia, how about you? What thoughts do you have about what are the most important needs, something that you would really like to see change?
I would really like to see the providers be educated, as many of the panel members have said before. One of my terrible memories is I had a VA I went to the VA to take advantage of the memory care program that they had, but I was turned away because I was told that they didn't see anyone my age there. And they referred me to the VA neurologist, which in turn told me that I did not have dementia, that my scan was a fluke because I was not demented. Now, if a neurologist will say that, then we have a long way to go as far as education and empathy goes.
Thank you, Nia. And I think you raise a really important point when you say education and empathy. So those are both important, that what we know about dementia continues to evolve. It is a very complicated area. Our brains are all very unique, but in addition to the fact that sometimes it can be hard to make an accurate diagnosis because it's complex, that empathy is so important. How does the person communicate a diagnosis, or how do they talk with their patient about what the next steps would be? I've heard so many people tell stories like you're sharing, where they were spoken to in a way that made them feel really hopeless, made them feel dehumanized. And that's a terrible thing that we should be able to work on fixing. So what I want to do now is just bring the roundtable to a closing with a positive question about what can we do to help people talk about dementia. So we'll go back to this issue of open communication. And I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have about the ingredients that you think help people start to feel more comfortable in saying the words, asking the questions, really communicating openly about dementia. So I will start with Judith.
Thank you, Beth. I think that's my favorite questions. And I think dementia education should start at the higher level with stakeholders. For example, I'm working with older adults population, so I apply food stamps. I have to recertify their lease. So at early stage of dementia, when they receive the letters from food stamps, they forget to renew their food stamp every year. So what happened? It's like of a punishment. If you start to become forgetfulness, unfortunately, they will cut your food stamps. So I think we really need to address at the higher level as we get older, dementia, it should be a red flag for us that everybody should pay attention the way we live, because we forget a lot of time, and that's the first time in the community they forget to pay their rent, they forget to renew their food stamp, they forget to renew their healthcare insurance, and the stakeholders, the higher level, they just cut all services. So you can imagine someone who lives with dementia, especially in independent living, because they don't have children around, they don't have some housing, they don't have no services. So as a punishment, those people with dementia, and now they don't have no food, they don't have no services, they don't have no transportation services. So I think dementia friends in the future should increase this program in the higher level, in the institution level, and make dementia education as a priority, as a former, even in human resources, to understand people. So that's my wish, and everybody can live well with dementia if the higher level knows about it.
Thank you, Judith. The importance of education and communication at the higher level. Thank you. Kun, what about you?
Yeah, I have a dream. We have a place, have open mind, open arm, people we can trust, speak your language, understand your culture. I think that's the key. If people feel comfortable to talk about this, I think change the whole thing. So I think the coming to the structure side should be community-based organization, local council on aging, a community center, senior center, they usually visit. Usually they feel comfortable to interact with the people. So start from there. That will be a great place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Kun. I think that Nia may have gotten disconnected. Jessica, if you see her come back in, can you spotlight her again? Let's go on to Alana.
Well, in my community, I see that they don't have any problem to talk about dementia, but they don't know where to look for services and help to them. So I totally, again, agree with Kun that we have to have something in other languages, you know, and understand about the culture, because it's very different. And when you go in somewhere, the treatment sometimes is not what they expect. So it's my dream too, Kun, to have all of this.
Thank you. I love the way you're both painting this picture. It's very encouraging. Arnetta, how about you? What do you think helps open the communication?
I would have to agree with Alana and Judith and Kun. We do need our officials to be more educated on what is going on in the world of dementia and Alzheimer's, so that these problems don't keep happening over and over and over. You know, we're all getting older. We're all going to start to experience what is going on with our seasoned elderly and senior populations. So yes, it does need to start at the top level. We need to share more with each other about what's going on in all our different communities.
Thank you, Arnetta. Kathy and Bonnie?
Of course, you know, we talk about, I mean, dementia is such a powerful and negative word, but it's also, as everybody keeps talking about, people are living with dementia. So what do we do for people have a sense of well-being when they're living with dementia? So, I mean, giving people things to do and what you can do. The arts are wonderful. They're failure-free activities. And also keeping people well, physically well and healthy when they are living with dementia too. Because if you're not feeling good, if your arthritis pain is bothering you and you are living with dementia, it's going to be coming out in other ways. So I think we all have an obligation that even if somebody is living with dementia, we don't forget about, you know, all those other aspects which keep our lives really fully, you know, keeping socially engaged, all those things that are good for our brain health overall. And the other thing that I wanted to also stress is the value of support groups for people who are living with dementia, or who also, even for family members. I facilitate an online support group for virtual national group for families who have somebody with an intellectual disability and dementia, and having that conversation, the support, and you were talking about people from within your community to be able to discuss these things, and people are, it's amazing the people who are in support groups, just how helpful they are to each other. And I don't underestimate the value of this for a lot of people, that in your culture, et cetera, how having each other to work, to support each other is amazing. And it's so powerful in itself. Bonnie?
Well, I want to, Beth, you talked about, you know, what ingredients there are, and I'm thinking about what's this recipe that we're creating. And Kun and Judith talked about their dreams, and I saw that in the chat, people were talking about dreams. And just so you know, I don't do dreams, I do wishes, and I have my magic wand, and so hopefully my wishes will also come true. And I have two wishes or ingredients I would like to be part of the future. The first is to move towards what we call, and I'm sure there's a broader term, a strengths-based approach to dementia. meaning not what somebody can't do, but let's focus on what they still can do and build upon that and see that sense of value. And the second is that I think that it's very, very important that we send the message that everyone in the community has a role to play. And I understand the importance of support groups and many of the other things that we have talked about, but I can't think of anyone who doesn't have a role. And unless we involve everyone and help them see that and see the strength, I'm not sure what we're going to cook with this recipe. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Bonnie. Well said. Let's go to Tirsa and then Saw.
Algo muy importante que debemos de hacer con
Something
nuestra
very important that we need to do with our community, the Latino community, in the case of my community, is that we need to gain their trust. When we gain their trust, we can also give them referrals to the different resources available, because many of them are immigrants and they don't have the knowledge of those resources. I think it's very important to gain their trust, because we always have that barrier that don't allow people to open up their hearts. I think it's very important to get close to them and to open the doors so they can have those resources that are available in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tirsa. It's so important to emphasize the role of trust. And Saw will give you the last word on our roundtable.
Here in our community, the same as Tirsa said, trust is very important to build trust and caring for our community. To mean if we can find someone trustworthy in our community to share more information or bring more awareness about dementia, and to educate and guide the family members on how to help and support, as well as share the resources with the families who are living with dementia and their family member, I think will be very helpful, as most people in our community feel more comfortable sharing and be more open about their situation with the community leader they trust. And it's also easier for them to ask for help for their community leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Saw. And I think it's a great note to close this part of our program with the emphasis on trust and that community connection. So I want to thank you all for all of your thoughts and wisdom. And Anne, if you want to take people off spotlight, what we're going to do now is have a break of about 8 minutes. We'll come back at 3:35. I'm going to show a video that our